Hello CS111 students, this is my problem set video for problem set 6 task 4 recursive scales. And again, this is going to be a short video because problem set 6 task 4 recursive scales is asking you to do almost, not quite the same, but almost the same thing as you were doing in the original problem set 5 scales task. The only difference is that you have to do it recursively instead of doing it using loops. So, I should also mention that this is an optional task where you only have to do one of tasks 3 and 4 in this problem set. You have the choice between doing the graphics-based concentric circles task or this music-based scales task. So I'm going to go through the different parts. We're skipping the half-step scale that we did in the original task. You only have two functions to do: scale up and uneven scale up. And so scale up, the parameters are start time, note length, pitch, notes up. Same kind of parameters as we were using for problem set 5 task 3. And in the original scale function, we were having you do a scale that went up and then came right back down. In scale up, in this problem set that's going to be recursive, we're softening that requirement, so you only have to do the part of the scale that goes up, which makes things simpler. The number of notes in the scale is exactly the same as the notes up parameter. There's no notes going back down, and also should make it easier to figure out how to do that recursively, which is why we changed the requirement a little bit there. But other than that, the requirements are the same. Each note should be one step above the last. The first note should start at the given start time. All the notes should have the given note length. The first note should start at the given pitch, and then it goes up from there, one step at a time using that step up function. So we have an example of what that should sound like, and an example of what should be printed, and the testing code does print that for you. So that's scale up. How about uneven scale up? Well, you may have guessed this by now, but it's the same as uneven scale was from problem set 5 task 3, except that we're only going up. We're not going back down. Another thing I should note is that neither scale up nor uneven scale need to be fruitful. This is another change because the original scale and uneven scale functions were fruitful. They returned the time of the last note. It's not as though it's impossible to do that in a recursive situation, but to simplify things for you, we are changing that requirement. So neither function needs to be fruitful. They just don't have to return anything. You just have to worry about adding the correct notes to the track. There are some hints that I should mention. The hint for scale up is the same as the hint for uneven scale up, which is that each function call frame only needs to add a single note. And it would be hard to do more than that because you're not allowed to use loops. You have to use recursion to achieve the goal here. For uneven scale up, note that just like in problem set 5 task 3, the last note of the scale is always a long note, right? Because the notes in an uneven scale are long, short, long, short, long, short, long, short, or short, long, short, long, short, long, whatever it needs to be so that the last note is a long one and every other note based on that is short, is half the duration. So we have provided some examples of what that will sound like. As well as what will be printed by different function calls, and you can check these against what's printed when you run it. You can even use that diff checker website that we mentioned. It's linked in several previous problem sets, including problem set 1 in several places, but you can use that diff checker website to check this text exactly against what is printed out when you run the testing code. But that's it. So just two functions to write, both recursive, both doing the same thing that you've done before with this twist where you don't need to go back down, so we've simplified it, and you don't need to return anything. But you have to figure out how to do both of those recursively without using loops. That's it for me.